How does the fault?
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Something's wrong with Donald Trump. He's shaky, weak, trouble speaking, trouble walking. So why aren't we talking about this? And why isn't the press covering Trump's secretive midnight run to Walter Reed Medical Center? Why do so many reporters who cover the White House pretend they can't see Trump's decline? The most powerful office in the world needs more than a weak, unfit, shaky president. Trump doesn't have the strength to lead, nor the character to admit it. We're not doctors. We're not blind. It's time we talk about this. Trump is not well.
Oh, these go. The latest from the Lincoln Group, everybody. Kellyanne Conway's husband, George Conway III, and, Rick Wilson. So, listen, if you're going to, show videos of Hillary Clinton passing out and holding on to handrails and, insist that Joe Biden is senile and everybody knows it and you could see, then, all we have to do is have a presidential debate about who can hold and drink water in public, and then set up a ramp at the debate and see who can walk down it. That's it. Whoever does that wins. How's that, everybody? Are you good with that? All right, so here's what we're waiting for. Any minute now, we're going to get the prosecutor's decision in the Rayshard Brooks killing, the murder of Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta. Garrett Rolfe, he is the officer who is going to be facing charges. We don't know what those charges are. But, listen, if this were, let's say, Rayshard Brooks shooting a police officer in the back, I think we would already know what the charges are. But okay, we have to, hash this out. We have to wait and see. We have to weigh the case. We have to make sure we're on, solid ground before we can announce what in the world we're charging Garrett Rolfe with. Now, I am, keeping this one over here. I'm keeping it on the courtroom. That's what I have live. It's running in the background here. You can't see it. But I just wanted to go over this with you real quick, okay? This is just amazing. Now, today the Republicans, they introduced their vacuous excuse, a waste of paper of a proposal on police reform. There's no ban on chokeholds. There's no requirement to be part of a national database with, a list of any incidents or complaints or use of force violations. No. So, scratch that. Let the House, vote on their bill. The House have the Police Act, the Justice and Policing Act, that does cover all this ground, so we'll just wait for the House to vote, then the Senate will vote on their bill, then it'll have to go to a conference committee, and then the negotiations shall begin. And probably we won't get anything. We won't get anything, even though most Americans, an enormous number of Americans, want police reform. They want it. They know it's needed. They get the stats. They understand that if you are a black man in this country, you're 2.5 times more likely to end up in a situation like Rayshard Brooks. Everybody gets it. Everybody knows it. Everybody gets how many more times black drivers are pulled over as opposed to white drivers. And if you're not clear on the stats, if you're still, tweeting out fake charts and stuff like that there, or you don't understand the charts that you're looking at, in the homework today at randirhodes.com, in the homework today, there are the stats. There are the stats. And the stats come from a study that was published last month that reviewed 100 million, 100 million traffic stops by police departments nationwide. And what it found will not surprise us, but for the death cult, it might. Black drivers far more likely to be pulled over than white drivers. Interestingly enough, at night when the police can't really see what color you are, it sort of levels out. Meanwhile, black and Hispanic drivers were searched twice as often as white drivers were, even though black drivers and Hispanic drivers were much, much less likely to be found with any drugs. Yeah, white people have more drugs on them than black people and Hispanic people. So anyway, African-American men were about 2.5 times more likely than white men to be killed by police. Men of color face a non-trivial lifetime risk of being killed by police. The lifetime risk for African-American men of dying at the hands of police is 1 in 1,000. That makes policing the #1 cause of death for black men. Just thought I'd throw that out there before I show you something. So while we're waiting for this prosecutor, I thought I would give you some of the notes that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution was able to get about Garrett Rolfe, the officer who shot Rayshard Brooks in the back 2 times, right? The documents, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, good newspaper, reliable, blah, blah, blah. If they got it wrong, believe me, you'd see a correction by now. They didn't get much detail. So the circumstances of the incidents I'm about to tell you are not very clear. However, Officer Garrett Rolfe, who is 27 years old, has already racked up 13 incident complaints, okay? His file shows that in 2015, he discharged a firearm and it was written up as a excessive use of force with a firearm, but the report itself shows no conclusion. Like, why did he use excessive force with a firearm? See, this is why we need a mandatory national database of police complaints and incident reports so that when Garrett Rolfe is fired, which he has been, from the Atlanta police, he can't then move to Mississippi where they might welcome a man like this. Okay? Just saying. Well, his file shows 12 other incidents and you know what's really interesting? Vehicle accidents. The man crashes his car apparently, or hits things with his car, or has accidents with his car. And this is why Rayshard Brooks, it was a sitting in a Wendy's drive-through while sleeping incident. Okay, and here's a man who's got both vehicle accidents. One led to a written reprimand, another led to an oral admonishment, and then there were 9 other incidents. They exonerated him on these 9, but it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell you, like what he did.
New records, as you know, show that the Atlanta police officer who shot and killed Rayshard Brooks had several citizen complaints against him. What are you learning about this police officer's history? He's now been fired, and potentially there could be charges leveled against him as early as tomorrow.
That's why the officers' names, when something like this happens, has to be released immediately instead of these extended delays that we see all the time, because we've been flooded with calls from people in the community that have had interactions with them negatively. We've turned over the significant ones to the authorities, and we're following up on all of these complaints.
Isn't that special? And that's why the Republicans' empty gesture is exactly that. It's an empty gesture. All right. I'm going to roll on the prosecutor courtroom scenario that I'm watching right now, because any moment we will get a decision on the charges against Garrett Rolfe, which is who the lawyer there was just talking about, and find out what the prosecutor is going to charge this 27-year-old with 13 on-the-job citizens' complaints. Yeah, we'll see.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
We're also going to be looking into why were all of these 9 of the 12, I think, dismissed, which is an issue that we see constantly with some police departments, is that internal affairs complaints aren't followed through.
What is this new information potentially about this police officer, Garrett Rolfe's history? What does it mean for the case?
Well, it shows a pattern. As I said, in a lot of the cases that I've handled, the officer has a history of using excessive force or breaking rules or policies. The problem is that they stay on the force.
Yes.
And so this leads to what we all saw Saturday.
Yes, exactly the point. This is why we need reform. You know, the videos that we have already seen of police violence are off the charts. It is so out of control. And now we're finding out that you've got the white supremacists, you've got the Civil War agitators, the Boogaloo boys, you got the Proud Boys, you got boys, you got white boys, you got militia boys, you got biker boys, all infiltrating these protests. Just like I told you, the Wendy's in Atlanta was set on fire by, now we're starting to hear two white girls. One was wearing all black, and the other one was seen by a bystander, and he recorded her lighting the match. Okay, I can show it to you. It is just so unbelievable. The 3rd precinct in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, right? We saw that the guy who was arrested for setting that on fire was also a white guy. And now we see in Las Vegas, there were 3 Boogaloo trios that were planning violence like they thought they were in the military. We saw what happened in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with this New Mexico Civil Guard and one of the guys. Turns out the guy that shot the people in Albuquerque, New Mexico, we showed you the video of him yesterday, and then he got surrounded by protectors who were all wearing their field gear and their fake military outfits. And these Army surplus stores must be. But it turns out that these 3 guys do have military backgrounds. And Stephen Parshall is from the Navy. William Loomis is from the Navy. And Andrew Lyman, I think his name is. He's an Army reservist. And these 3 guys were conducting their own version of military operations, talking in code, wearing this tactical military gear, carrying weapons. They had explosive materials. They were conducting reconnaissance missions. They were following the playbook of the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. Swear to God. They even when they were arrested, they had a copy of the IRA's Green Book, which is a training manual written by the IRA, the Irish terrorist organization, that was trying to wage war against the British government, and they targeted police. But it's just so unbelievable. And they're 35 years old. They're not kids, okay? They're just not children. These people are just unbelievable. And one of the guys, the youngest guy, is 23 years old. He told the investigators after he got arrested that he organized the group. Now, one of the more common themes of all these guys, of all these places, Texas, Albuquerque, Oakland, California, where 2 Bay Area officers were shot and killed. Remember, the right wing was going crazy. Police officers, don't their lives matter? Charlie Kirk tweeting at me. I tweeted back at him last night saying, the 2 Bay Area officers, they're tied to the right-wing Boogaloo groups. Care to comment now? Oh, no, all of a sudden it's very quiet. They killed David Patrick Underwood, and they killed a sheriff's deputy in Santa Cruz, too. They're infiltrating all of these peaceful protests. Anyway, here's the video of the white woman who started the fire in Atlanta.
We've obtained this new video shot by a Channel 2 viewer showing a better, clearer view of one of the women Atlanta police are searching for allegedly setting fire to this Wendy's. Here you can see her seconds later as she walks away from the building. Police also had previously released these photos of this woman dressed in black holding an aerosol can, her face covered. Atlanta Police Foundation President Dave Wilkinson was a career Secret Service agent. He tells me these women clearly stand out from the crowd of predominantly peaceful protesters.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And when you see that video of the suspects in Crime Stoppers, they certainly look different. They certainly look dressed differently.
For weeks, law enforcement have told us they suspect it's a small number of people, possibly associated with outside groups fueling the violence. This is what GBI Director Vic Reynolds told us earlier this month.
Anecdotally, we're confident that there were groups present here that we expected to be here.
The Police Foundation and Crime Stoppers are offering a $10,000 reward for info on these women and any others who may be linked to the arson.
We're talking about the individuals that are literally throwing Molotov cocktails, right? The folks that are setting businesses on fire.
Look, she's doing it.
It appears that their intention for being there is to destroy property and wreak havoc and create violence.
So here you have a group of protesters having to explain to the media, having to explain to cameramen who are also being attacked by the police, not by militiamen, not by boys, not by Proud Boys or Boogaloo Boys or Blue Boys or whatever's bothering them, right? No, but they're having to explain why the neighborhoods are on fire after somebody gets killed, and they don't even know that they've been infiltrated and that their community didn't do the violence. That these were the same idiots that were in Michigan with the reopen protests. And the thing that they all have in common is they all organize themselves on Facebook. On Facebook. They're meeting each other on Facebook. They're organizing on Facebook. This is just so unacceptable. And so you've got these the two guys that were arrested after. You got one guy that was arrested in Albuquerque after the protest. He's an infiltrator. He shot a guy named Scott Williams. This guy's name is Stephen Ray Baca. Stephen Ray Baca. He's an infiltrator. You got this New Mexico civil guard, and they go, "Oh, we didn't know him. We didn't know him." But you rallied around him and you protected him after he shot a protester. And the right wing will tell you, well, that man deserved to be shot. Scott Williams did, because he hit Stevie Ray Baca with a skateboard. But what you don't know is the reason why Stevie Ray Baca was hit with a skateboard is because he had thrown a woman to the ground. Yeah. Stevie Ray Baca started the violence by, quote, violently throwing a woman to the ground, and the protesters went after him to get him to leave, and Scott Williams hit him with a skateboard. And then Stevie Ray Baca shot him. And this civil guard, oh, by the way, Stevie Ray Baca is a former city councilman candidate. Yeah.
To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
All right, the prosecutor in this case is Paul Howard. I think you've seen him before, and right now he is showing the evidence that he has and has based whatever he's about to charge Garrett Rolfe with on.
The other thing that we have had an opportunity to do is to view some of the physical evidence. The Chevrolet Trailblazer was a vehicle that was in the line at Wendy's on the night of this incident, and it received a shot from Officer Rolfe's gun. We've had an opportunity, along with the GBI now, to view that Trailblazer. My office has had an opportunity to inspect the crime scene. We have conducted a canvass of the area. We started our investigation at about 1:15 a.m. on Saturday morning, and we have been working on this case around the clock since that time. Go to the next slide. We have spent some time examining the taser evidence in this case. We've actually examined and possessed the two tasers that were used. We have also had an opportunity to examine the taser logs that are prepared as the tasers are used, and we have also consulted with a taser expert from the company that manufactures the tasers. We received a preliminary medical autopsy. We've received a preliminary ballistics report, and in reaching our conclusions today, we have worked with both the Georgia Bureau of Investigation as well as the Atlanta Police Department. This will be the fourth time that we have asked that arrest warrants are issued in a case before an indictment. This lists the other 3 cases that we were involved with where an arrest warrant was issued prior to indictment. Unfortunately, this marks the 40th prosecution of police officers for misconduct here in our county, and this is the 9th time that we've prosecuted a homicide case committed by a police officer. 8 of those cases involved black males, and one of those cases involved a black female. So in reaching our decision, there were some considerations that we considered important. And one of the things that we noted from our evaluation was that Mr. Brooks, on the night of this incident, was calm, he was cordial, and really displayed cooperative nature. Secondly, even though Mr. Brooks was impaired, his demeanor during this incident was almost jovial. Also, we noted that he received many instructions from the Atlanta officers, and he was asked many questions. Some of the questions he was asked repeatedly, but for 41 minutes and 17 seconds, he followed every instruction, he answered the questions. The fourth thing we noted is that Mr. Brooks was never informed that he was under arrest for driving under the influence. And this is a requirement of the Atlanta Police Department. When one is charged with a DUI, the Atlanta Police Department's own procedures require that that person is informed immediately that they are under arrest. And then he was grabbed from the rear by Officer Rolfe, who made an attempt to physically restrain him after the 41-minute and 17-second discussion. We concluded and considered it as one of our important considerations that Mr. Brooks never presented himself as a threat. At the very beginning, he was peacefully sleeping in his car. After he was awakened by the officer, he was cooperative, and he was directed to move his car to another location. He calmly moved his car. Mr. Brooks was asked whether or not he had a weapon. He indicated that he did not. Without any resistance, he passed his driver's license to the officers, and the officers then asked Mr. Brooks whether or not he would consent to a pat-down or a body search, and Mr. Brooks allowed them to search him, and the search yielded no weapon. We found that it was of interest that when the officers patted Mr. Brooks down, they noticed there was a bulge in his pants. They did not pull that item out of his pocket. They took Mr. Brooks's word that that bulge represented a number of dollar bills. But Mr. Brooks never displayed any aggressive behavior during the 41 minutes and 17 seconds. Now, this is another important consideration that we discovered as we evaluated this case. Once Mr. Brooks was shot, there is an Atlanta policy that requires that the officers have to provide timely medical attention to Mr. Brooks or to anyone who is injured. But after Mr. Brooks was shot, for some period of 2 minutes and 12 seconds, there was no medical attention applied to Mr. Brooks. But when we examined the videotape and in our discussions with, what we discovered is during the 2 minutes and 12 seconds that Officer Rolfe actually kicked Mr. Brooks while he laid on the ground. They're fighting for his life.
Oh my God.
Secondly, from the videotape, we were able to see that the other officer, Officer Brosnan, actually stood on Mr. Brooks's shoulders while he was there struggling for his life.
Oh my God.
We were able to conclude that based on the way that these officers conducted themselves while Mr. Brooks was lying there, that the demeanor of the officers immediately after the shooting did not reflect any fear or danger of Mr. Brooks, but their actions really reflected other kinds of emotions.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there. We can come back. I'm going to find another feed. That's the Washington Post feed, and it's glitchy. I don't know why, but let's see if I can find a better one for us. So what you're listening to is the Fulton County DA, the district attorney, the prosecutor in this case, lay out the evidence he has prior to announcing what he's going to charge Officer Garrett Rolfe with in the murder of Rayshard Brooks. I can't believe he kicked him while he was fighting for his life, and Brosnan, the other officer, stood on his shoulders. Really? Really?
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Oh, this is terrible. This is just terrible. I have to tell you, but let me listen to with you Paul Howard live. He is the Fulton County District Attorney, and he is charging.
But he indicated that he is not psychologically willing to give that statement today. Officer Brosnan, however, has admitted that he was in fact standing on Mr. Brooks's body immediately after the shooting. So these are the charges that we have had filed today, signed by one of our Superior Court judges. These are the 11 charges against Officer Rolfe. The first charge is felony murder. This is the death that is as a result of a underlying felony, and in this case, the underlying felony is aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and the possible sentences for a felony murder conviction would be life without parole, or the death penalty. Now, he's also charged in the arrest warrant with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and this is a count charging him for the shooting of Mr. Brooks, and the possible sentence for aggravated assault is 1 to 20 years. The third aggravated assault account is for the shooting towards or in the direction of Mr. Melvin Evans. Mr. Evans was the person who was seated in the car.
Oh, God. The trailblazer. I told you there was a family sitting in their car, and this crazy officer, when he was firing at the back of Rayshard Brooks, managed to get a bullet into this trailblazer that had nothing to do with anything.
And if you would point out, this automobile is the place that Mr. Evans and his two companions were driving, and a shot was fired. And I believe we've also got a photo of the shot that ended up in the vehicle.
I
think you gotta stand it up.
Okay, there's a bullet hole right by the wheel
so
well.
With count 4 against Miss Officer Rolfe, it charges him with aggravated assault for firing the weapon in or in the direction of Danielle Killians, who was in the passenger side of the front seat of the car. Next slide. Count 5 is an aggravated assault charge, and this was a charge for shooting towards or in the direction of Michael Perkins. Mr. Perkins was seated in the rear of this same vehicle at that time. There's a charge for criminal damage for shooting into that vehicle. Also, Officer Rolfe is charged with 7 violations of office. Each one of those carries a 1 to 5 sentence. These are violations of his oath of office for the city of Atlanta, arresting Mr. Brooks for the DUI without immediately informing him of the arrest, shooting a taser at Mr. Brooks while he was running away, which again is a violation of Atlanta's own SOP. Thirdly, excessive force when shooting a firearm at Mr. Brooks. And number 4 is the failure to render timely medical aid. Those are the 4 violations of oath. The 8th is for kicking Mr. Brooks, and the possible sentence for kicking Mr. Brooks is from 1 to 20 years.
Wow.
And we actually have a photograph of the...
Oh, no. Oh, wow. Wow, wait. We're on a slight delay here. I've already seen it. He's literally winding up and kicking him. He's not just kicking him. He's like winding up and kicking him. This is what you would call throwing the book at somebody. 11 charges, felony murder, aggravated assault on bystanders who did absolutely nothing but yet sustained a bullet hole in their car, violations of office.
And these are the charges for Officer Brosnan, and there are a total of 3 charges.
Oh boy.
And the first charge is for aggravated assault, and this is for standing or stepping on Mr. Brooks's shoulder. And the possible sentence for this crime is 1 to 20 years. And this is a photograph of Officer Brosnan, who you can see to the right. And at the time of the photograph, he is standing on the body of Mr. Brooks. And as I've indicated earlier in our conversations with Officer Brosnan, he has admitted that he stood on the body of Mr. Brooks. He said he believes that he was standing on Mr. Brooks's arm, but that is what the photograph shows. We've also charged him with additionally 2 violations of oath. One is for the standing on the shoulder. That is an unauthorized weaponless control technique which the city of Atlanta prohibits. And the second violation of oath was for the failure to render timely medical aid to Mr. Brooks. So the arrest warrants have already been signed. We are asking Officer Rolfe and Officer Brosnan to surrender themselves by 6 p.m. on the morrow. Because Officer Brosnan is now becoming a cooperating witness for the state. We are asking the court to grant a bond of $50,000 and to allow Mr. Officer Brosnan to sign that bond. As I indicated, that he would become one of the first police officers to actually indicate that he is willing to testify against someone in his own department.
Wow.
As for Officer Rolfe, the person who fired the 2 bullets, we're recommending no bond for Officer Rolfe.
Oh.
If he is given a bond, that would be done by one of our Superior Court judges. But because of the severity of his act, and then following up that act with kicking Mr. Brooks, we're asking that he not be granted a bond.
Okay, I guess you get the idea here. Felony murder is the charge against Garrett Rolfe, the officer who shot Rayshard Brooks in the back as he was running away. His partner, who was the first person who knocked on the window of Rayshard Brooks' car and actually gave him, the opportunity to go. I mean, the first officer, Brosnan, he didn't even want to, do anything. He just told Rayshard Brooks to, move his car, and that would be that, right? But Rayshard Brooks fell asleep again. He fell asleep again. And that is when Officer Brosnan called for backup and Officer Rolfe showed up. And that's, then they played with Rayshard Brooks. They literally, I told you, this video was 43 minutes long. And for 41 minutes, they were toying with Rayshard Brooks. And he was jovial, and he was compliant, and he was, he was definitely drunk. There's just no question about it. He was confused. He was drunk. He shouldn't be driving. He offered to leave his car. He offered to walk to his sister's house. But instead, they decided, or Rolfe decided, that after 41 minutes of this man saying, hey, look, I know you're only doing your job. Let me leave my car, go to my sister's house. She lives right across the street. He decided that he would suddenly just put him in handcuffs, and the fight or flight instinct kicked in, and Rayshard Brooks ran, which turned out to be a fatal mistake. The taser that he took from the police officer had already been fired 2 times against him, rendering that taser useless. And those police officers know that. They knew that the taser that Rayshard Brooks had represented 0 threat to them because it had already been fired twice. Also, they were 18 feet apart. Rayshard Brooks was running away, and the first shot in his back literally pierced his heart.
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Officials are now charging a suspect in the murder of a federal security officer in Oakland, California last month. Air Force Sergeant Stephen Carrillo is accused of gunning down Deputy Dave Patrick Underwood and also with the attempted murder of another officer. Authorities say Carrillo traveled with another man to Oakland with the motive to kill police officers, which allegedly was spurred by the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The 2 men met on Facebook and are believed to be part of a far-right, anti-government extremist movement. Joining us now, NBC News reporter Ben Collins. Ben, you've been looking into this extremist group. I guess first explain who they are and what do you know about them?
Sure. It's a loosely affiliated group. They're called the Boogaloo. It comes from a 4chan meme. 4chan is an extremist website, and the meme is Civil War II electric Boogaloo. And that sounds like a joke. It sounds ironic and all this stuff. Yeah. That's the mask they use to hide the extremism that some of them wind up carrying out. And really what it is, it's a collection, a loose collection of anti-government groups who come together online, talk about guns, things like that, fantasize about the takeover of the government.
Oh, God.
And that's what drove this guy, too. This is what we've seen. This guy was in a Boogaloo group on Facebook, which are very much allowed on Facebook. And he met this other fellow, Robert Justice, and he asked to use a van to drive him down to this protest. And he said, use their anger to fuel our fire, and we have mobs of angry people to use to our advantage. He's talking about the protesters there, the protesters with which he doesn't necessarily agree. He just wants to start some unrest so it can kick off some sort of civil war or race war.
That is who is infiltrating the peaceful protesters. This is much to the chagrin of the right-wing media, of the Fox News and the Breitbarts and the OANs and all of these, conspiracy theory types, right? I mean, we can go through everything that has happened at these protests that was violent and almost to an incident connected to some Facebook group that either wants civil war or they're white supremacists or they're homicidal maniacs and they're finding each other on freaking Facebook. So this is the story of the right wing going crazy after the George Floyd protests got underway, and they're still underway. Monday was the 21st, Tuesday's 22nd. This is the 23rd day of protests. I got news for you. They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop unless and until we get real serious about police reform, real serious about redirecting the money that goes to armed police officers when they have to respond to non-criminal situations. That is pretty much in a nutshell what the protesters want, what we are asking for, what we have been asking for, that real serious justice reform. Now, this guy, Steve Carrillo, he literally killed 2 police officers in the Bay Area, one in Santa Cruz and one in Oakland. Okay, they were looking for this guy, Steve Carrillo guy. They were looking for him for 8 days. And in those 8 days, while the protests were going on, Fox News was screaming about police officers that have been shot, and it's these damn protesters, and they're out of control, and Donald Trump, it's violent out there, and showing old video footage of fires and mayhem, the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis. Turns out almost every one of the arsons, every one of the violent encounters were done by these creeps, done by these violent maniacs who dress up in either Hawaiian shirts or in military gear or what, and go out and infiltrate these protests to try and cause a civil war, a race war, chaos, by doing violence and blaming it on the protesters, the black ones. So on Tuesday, yesterday, the federal law enforcement officials, they finally announced that they were charging, and this really hurts me, Air Force Sergeant Steve Carrillo and his accomplice, Robert A. Justice Jr. Carrillo's 32 years old. Justice Jr. is 30 years old. They killed a federal security officer in Oakland. And then they finally got a tip about this white van, and they followed the tips, and they were able to find the van in front of Mr. Sergeant Carrillo's home. And there, in the early afternoon, Sergeant Carrillo opened fire on the deputies and ended up killing another police officer. He killed Sergeant Damon Gutzweiler and injured another deputy. And then there was an explosion. I'm not kidding. There was an explosion. He had bomb-making materials in his house. So it's just so interesting that you don't hear very much about these guys. Really, you don't. But Carrillo was shot during the gunfire. He ran away. Then he hijacked a car on a nearby highway. And when he was arrested, he was bleeding from his hip. And he took his own blood and smeared a message. This is like Charles Manson crap, okay? This is just like Charles Manson crap. So he used his own blood and he wrote a message on the hood of the car he hijacked that said Boog, B-O-O-G, and then he wrote, "I became unreasonable," which is some throwback to an old freaking movie, and then "Stop the duopoly." Just so you know, this guy was part of an elite Air Force security unit at Travis Air Force Base in Fairfield. He was a team leader, and he was trained to protect aircraft at airstrips, which is very, very similar to my job. He was trained to protect aircraft and airstrips from terrorists and insurgents. But they found all his posts on Facebook, and they became increasingly disturbing right before he went off the rails and shot this Oakland police officer and then another police officer in Santa Cruz and his deputy. And apparently, there have been 27 homicides connected to far-right extremists in the last year. In the last year. Not including these. Not including these. So that brings the number to 29. Nevada and Las Vegas, you had 3 guys that were arrested. You had Stephen Parshall, Navy veteran, William Loomis, Navy veteran, and Andrew Lyman, Army Reserve. And those were the guys that were that were wearing the military gear, the tactical military gear, and talking in code and running reconnaissance missions and all this. And they were part of the reopen protests. You know how you have these crazy people who don't want to wear a mask because they don't feel any kinship towards you or their neighbors or their friends and family, so they don't want to wear a mask to lower the transmission rate of this freaking deadly virus to about 3%, which is what the transmission rate is when you wear a mask. No, they'd rather just, take their chances. They'd rather die than wear a face mask. So these guys were part of that reopen mess. That reopen mess, that was the Michigan crowd, okay, that we saw. Looked just like them, right? With the arms and the long guns strapped to their back. In the faces of the police. In the faces of the police at the Capitol in Lansing, right? And the police were very copacetic. They were very accommodating. They were very, very nice. Didn't feel a threat from any of these armed lunatics. No. And then you have the Albuquerque, New Mexico incident where a former city council candidate shot Scott Williams after he threw just amazing.
At RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Oh, dear God, pray for me. I hope this is bleeped really well. But this is what happened in Albuquerque, okay? This is what happened in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where a man named Scott Williams was shot. Now, people are screaming, but Scott Williams needed to be shot because he hit Stevie Ray Baca. This is another incident of, New Mexico Civil Guard, okay? This is another crazy bunch of people that don't realize when you separate from the military, guess what? You're separated from the military. You don't get to dress up anymore and kill things. So anyway, this is, and they're going, oh, well, Scott Williams, he hit him with a skateboard. Yeah, let's back it up just before he hits him with the skateboard so you'll know why he did that. These heavily armed individuals who showed up at this protest to create chaos, that was their purpose, calling themselves the Civil Guard. They were there to menace the protesters. They were there to show a unsanctioned, unrelegated show of force. Threw a woman to the ground. That's why Scott Williams, you'll hear him. He's saying, let go of her. Take your effing hands off of her. I hope it's bleeped.
Get your hands off of that. No problem. Get your hands off of her.
Get your hands off of her.
Get your hands off of them. Get your hands off. Get your hands off of them. The New Mexico Civil Guard is here assaulting peaceful protesters. You guys are hit. The New Mexico Civil Guard is out here assaulting peaceful protesters.
What is with the outfit? Okay, so the protest groups are trying to tear down a statue of a conquistador. Did you hear the gunshot? Yes.
I need people down here. I need someone down here. I'm by myself. Jonathan's in the car out of it.
Yo!
See, he hit him shot him. Okay, I know it's very loud and very noisy. I know it is. That's what mayhem sounds like. It's loud, it's noisy, and it usually has gunshots. So that is what happened in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at the hands of these lunatics that are trying to infiltrate, and are infiltrating, I should say, in this paramilitary, chaotic way to start a civil war. They are inserting themselves into the protesters. Okay, happened in Texas, too. In Texas, you had some bodybuilder. He was denied bail because he's tied to the Boogaloo movement. And the only mention of Antifa, which Bill Barr says is a terrorist group, and Donald Trump says is a terrorist group. The only mention of Antifa in any of these stories is Antifa is listed as a target of the violence. A target of the violence. The Texas bodybuilder also was a National Guardsman, and he was posting on Facebook that he was hunting Antifa. That's the only mention of Antifa. He was hunting Antifa. See. Okay, and then we have the report in Atlanta of who burned the Wendy's. Who burned the Wendy's?
Channel 2's Audrey Washington, live there again tonight at that Wendy's on University Avenue in Southwest Atlanta. Audrey, you were there when that restaurant caught fire, and now police are looking for the woman responsible.
The woman.
Yeah, and first I just want to say I'm not wearing my mask because we are at a safe distance away from the crowd, but I want to show you this right here is what remains of that Wendy's at this hour. You can basically see it's a burnt out shell. Now, while I was out here yesterday, so many protesters came up to me and started showing me pictures of the person they said set the fire here at this Wendy's. Now Atlanta police are searching for that same person. Arsonist wanted. Take a look at these pictures Atlanta police released of a person they say set the Wendy's on University Avenue on fire. Those are some of the same pictures peaceful protesters showed me Saturday night. A Channel 2 Action News viewer also tweeted this video of a woman dressed just like the person in the pictures, using what appears to be an aerosol can to spread the flames at the Wendy's. Protesters told me in some cases outside agitators are behind the property damage seen at some of the protests here in Atlanta and across the nation. This Wendy's is where 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks died during a police-involved shooting late Friday night. That officer was fired, and the chief of police, Erica Shields, stepped down. Earlier today, state legislators and protesters spoke at the Wendy's, which is now more of a memorial site.
They're doing it peacefully, and I think that's the way it should be, and that's why people protest. They have pent-up frustrations that they want to get out.
Are you angry?
Well, I am angry because I'm an African-American female. I've lived this experience.
This is a real movement, I think, this time, and I don't see it stopping.
Now, as you just heard there, protesters told me they are in this for the long haul. As for this Wendy's arson case, police are now offering a $10,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest in the case. Anyone with that information is asked to call Crime Stoppers.
So there's two women they're looking for, okay? They are on cell phone video. This was the first video I saw, okay? This was the very first one I saw. There's no...
Look at this white girl. Look at the white girl trying to set on fire. Look at the white girl trying to burn down the Wendy's. This wasn't us. This wasn't us.
See, and that is what makes it so important, is that they're trying to set up the Black Lives Matter protesters who are peaceful by lighting things on fire. So we know the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis was it was burned down by a white kid. We now know that they've infiltrated protests in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in Texas, in Las Vegas, in Oakland, California, and killing police officers, burning things down, bomb-making materials in the van, bomb-making materials in their house, the ballistic vests, and speaking in code and finding each other on freaking Facebook. Oh, we have a committee policy. We don't allow any violence. Oh, you know what? Bite me. Of course you do. There are hundreds of these, crazy lunatic Boogaloo Hawaiian shirt wearing right-wing separatist white supremacist groups all over that freaking platform, all over it. And they don't want to do anything about it because Donald Trump spends $269 million in advertising on Facebook. So it ends up in your news feed. And it's all bull. It's all propaganda. It's all a pack of lies. Last night, I'm watching Tucker. Because this man is about to, his advertisers are just, fleeing. Yeah, they're fleeing the interview. They're fleeing his interview because it's always racist. He decided to show pictures of downtown Seattle, which is nowhere near Capitol Hill, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone or the Capitol Hill Occupied Protesters, or CHOP or CHAZ, whatever they want to call it. It's fine with me. And it's peaceful, and it's, he decided to send one of his video photographers to downtown Seattle, where I've been a million times, which always looks like this video that he showed his audience last night, claiming that's what was going on in the Capitol Hill area.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Our own Kyle Rothenberg ventured into the nation formerly known as downtown Seattle. Here's what he found.
This music they put it to. Listen to it. It's like apocalyptic music. Oh, look, Tucker found hippies. He found hippies in downtown Seattle is what he found. Drug addicts and hippies. This is what they show their audience, okay? This is what they, and that is any day in most, major cities, especially Seattle, that is nowhere near what they're calling CHAZ or CHOP. That is nowhere near Capitol Hill. Nowhere. But this is the crap that they do. This is what they do. Tucker Carlson discovers, oh my God, there's hippies in Seattle. There's homeless people in Seattle. Let's take photos and tell our audience that this is the protest. This is the Black Lives Matters group. It's such a freaking lie. It's so amazingly bullcrap. And the fact that all these things went up in flames and now we're finding out that it's white people that are doing it on purpose to cause chaos, to make you blame Black Lives Matter for their violence. It's the oldest trick in the book. And they think that they're onto something, and they're shooting police officers. And Black Lives Matter is having to defend that when they had nothing to do with it. These are peaceful protesters who are wearing masks and outside. The president, on the other hand, is going to go to Tulsa, Oklahoma. I don't know. We're taking bets on whether or not he actually does this. I mean, it's insane that he would do this. But his supporters are obviously, it's what I've been telling you all freaking day, are a death cult. They love death. Show me some death. That's them. That's who they are. And so they will pile in to an indoor arena in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where COVID cases are spiking. This is not a second wave. We're not done with the first wave. And people think, oh, it's over in New York. And, New York did a great job, and their transmission rate is about 3%. Their transmission rate is less than 1, meaning that one person gives it to less than one person. That's kind of what you want to see, right? And their new cases are very, very, very small now. And they are outside protesting with masks on and hoping for the best. Could be a problem, could not be a problem, but they're outside with masks on. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's death cult wants to go into a 20,000-seat arena, pack in there, scream USA every time he insults an ethnic group, every time he insults somebody, every time he says, punch him in the face or, knock him out or I'll get you legal bills or whatever violence he wants to, feed them. they will start chanting and spitting on each other, right? And they're willing to die for him. They're willing to die for him. Problem is, they're going to come from all over the place. I mean, Tulsa, what's the population of Tulsa? 400,000? And they're telling us that there were 1 million requests for tickets? Okay, so here's a dirty little secret. You ready for this one? On TikTok, just want you to know. On TikTok, there was a woman who had this really, really good idea. Really good one. And what she said to all the people, and it was seen like 2 million times, so you know the message got out, right? She said, here's what you really need to do. You need to text the Trump campaign, because they put out a number that you could text asking for tickets. And she said, all right, go ahead and do that. And yes, you'll be on their list, right? So you get all these notices for the Trump campaign. You'll get all their bull crap and everything. But the law is such that if you text stop to anything commercial that's texting you, by law, they have to stop. So that being said, she said, everybody request tickets. Go request tickets. And then when he shows up in Tulsa, maybe there won't be any ticket holders, because all the tickets will be gone, and they have gone to us who have no intention of going there. That was the prank. Pretty good. I don't know if it worked. We'll see. But these people who are going to go to the BOK Center are willing to die. They're willing to go into this place where COVID is just now taking off. The South and the West are now seeing what New York had seen. God forbid. I don't wish that on anybody. Really, that was just a very dense city with people living, you know, in tiny little apartments. I mean, the square footage in New York is so expensive. I mean, an apartment in New York could be $2,000 a square foot, $1,400 a square foot, a square foot. So people live in tight quarters. When I worked at Air America, there was a girl that worked for us. Her name was Carmen. And she lived with 9 other girls in a tiny little apartment in Brooklyn. 9 other girls. When I was first starting out, I shared a studio apartment with 2 other girls. But I worked overnights on the radio, and they worked days, so the bed was never cold. There was always somebody in it. I would sleep during the day, work at night, and they'd go. Anyway, that's why COVID got to be what it, and that, Tulsa, 400,000 people, it's gonna, whatever. But they don't care. They don't care. They will go and risk it for him. And he, as the leader of the free world, will do that to people because his ego needs to be fed. Because he's a malignant narcissist and he needs to be fed like the monster he is. So we'll see if he does it or not. I mean, we're kind of, taking bets. Whether or not he cancels it at the last minute, whatever. I don't know. Because we found out yesterday, Anthony Fauci has not spoken to the president. Anthony Fauci has not spoken to the president in 2 weeks. Donald Trump thinks that if no one talks about hospitalizations on the rise in the South and in the West, then it isn't happening. See, this is the old theory. If it's not on the TV, it didn't happen. And being a radio person my whole life, now I'm on TV. Thank God for Free Speech TV. Oh, by the way, Pledge Drive, everybody, Pledge Drive. Go to freespeech.org right now. Right now. Only a couple more days left to show you love. But I used to say this all the time. If it's not on the TV, it didn't happen. Because that's America. Sadly, that's America. And I said that as a radio person, meaning I would be on the air every day. I used to do 4 hours a day, every day. I also used to follow Rush Limbaugh, which was like cleaning up in the circus after the elephant. But, okay. But this is the thinking. If it's not on the TV, it didn't happen. And so he's keeping COVID and the experts on COVID off the TV, risking your life.
Fatality. This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Okay, here is my Karen of the day, my white lady of the day. All right, you ready for her? She's fabulous.
Are you going to be wearing masks when you come in? Are you going to obey that city? And if not, then how in the world are you expecting any of us to obey anything that you say? I protest face coverings. I am a healthy American. I used to be free. I am not a terrorist. I am not Antifa. I am not a sex slave that wears masks. I am not into sadomasochism and bondage.
Why'd she mention that twice?
I am not a burglar. I am not a pandering politician like we see here, and here, and here, and here.
She brought props.
I am a proud Trump Republican, yearning to be free again. Who are you, victim or victor? If you are offended by anything I have said, by the masses of people, then I am offended by the masses of people who do not question your wholesale slaughter of our constitutional and inalienable rights. Shame on all of you. Let liberty ring. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans, white with foam.
She doesn't even know the words.
My question is she single? Because she's checking all my boxes, Randi. She's checking them all.
I should have known. I should have known that, Brett. The woman brought props, but she doesn't know the words to God Bless America. To the mountains, white with foam. Okay. That was our Karen of the day. Somebody sent me another Karen, but she needs to be bleeped so hard that poor Sean is going to be doing it all day tomorrow if we air that. But all in all, not a bad day. We've exposed, these crazy. Now, people are going to ask me, why ex-military? Why are the ex-military guys going so rage crazy? Why are they shooting people? Why are they burning things? My basic explanation is this. And it's only because of my experience that I'm saying this. I don't know if it's true for all these guys. I don't know what it is that crawled up their butts and died. I don't know what their itch is. I don't know how to scratch it. But I could tell you, separating from the military means a lot of things. And one of the things that it means is you're no longer part of, if you're a guy, a fraternity, okay? You're no longer part of this camaraderie, this fraternity, this group of people that have trained together to kill things. And they're lost without it. And so they're seeking each other and finding each other. And this is why it's different now, where everybody, like in my era, we used to suffer through our PTSD in silence. Now they're finding each other on the Facebook, on the Gab, on the 4chan. Twitter sort of kind of is proactive about violence, but TikTok is full of it, full of these Hawaiian shirt dudes, and full of them. And they're finding each other. And they have decided that any government is bad. It has to be destroyed. They want a war. They want it here so that they can fight it. Some are white supremacists. Some aren't. Some are just radical. I don't even want to call them libertarians because they're off on their own tangent. They just want war. They want war. They want it here, and they want it now so that they can relive the glory days of falling out, falling in, reveille. Right? They miss it. They miss the whole construct And that's why they dress up. That's why they cosplay. That's why they're doing this. They're raging inside. They have nobody to, commiserate with. And so when they find each other on Facebook, they go, hey, let's go kill things. It's really, it's bad. It's really bad. Meanwhile, these protests are a righteous protest. Black Lives Matter never said only Black Lives Matter, just so we can be clear about that, okay? I had my own Karen experience today. I didn't pull out my cell phone. I'm not that girl. But I had one today where a woman said to me, I'm going to get a new t-shirt. I didn't even know her. I've never met her. She's a stranger. But she looked, we were in a communal situation. I was at the hair salon, making my hair the exact same way that I've made it for 30 years, according to the trolls on Twitter. It's perfect. So I went to the hair salon, right? And a woman was there getting her hair done. And so we were all wearing masks and blah, blah, blah. And she says, well, I'm getting a new t-shirt. And I go, well, yeah, what's your t-shirt going to say? And she said, all lives matter. All lives matter. And I said to her, that kind of misses the point, don't you think? Well, I'm just so tired of all this. I just am. I can't. Why can't people just, why do they have to make it so complicated? There are criminals and there are good people, and that's the way it is. I said, well, honey, they're just asking for our help because we know all lives matter and they know all lives matter. So they're asking for our help to make sure that Black lives matter as much as yours. Oh, well, I'm just tired of it. I'm just tired. I'm so tired. I don't want to hear any more of it. This is the land of the free and the home of the brave. 100 million traffic stops. 1 in 1,000 black men have a lifetime risk of dying at the hands of the police. 1 in 1,000. The risk of COVID is less than that. And we still have 117,568 dead people from that disease in our country, with 2,153,000 cases, 2,153,203 cases that we know of. And by October, we will see 200,000 dead Americans. And yet, if you're an African-American man, the chances of you dying from a police encounter is greater than COVID. Crazy. So I said to her, well, if you're tired, can you imagine being a mom of a black son? How tiring that must be every time your kid leaves the house. Your heart is in your throat. Now your kid turns 17 or 16, gets his driver's license, and he wants to drive the car as a rite of passage. Can you imagine? Like the stuff that you felt when your kid first got their driver's license. It took your car. But now on top of it, they're a black boy. You're tired? Pull yourself up from your bootstraps, honey. No one's asking you to do anything but shut up. Well, she got up and walked out. Her hair was half wet. It's very humid here. I can't imagine what it looks like now, but I'm happy with the result of that. All right, Aaron in New Mexico.
Hi, Randy.
Hey, Aaron, how's your mom?
Wow.
Yeah, I hear you.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
That's what I keep saying. What are you gonna do? Everybody asks me about mine, and I go, "What are you gonna do?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, what are you gonna do?
Loretta had a root canal today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's I saw a friend of mine the other day because I went to go get some takeout food. I was wearing my mask, had it on. He called me over. He's an attorney even. Called me over, goes, hey, Aaron, hey. He goes, 6 feet away from me. I go, what? I thought he was joking away. I thought he was joking. Like, no. And he stood up and goes, 6 feet away. I go, what? There's a bunch of people in here not wearing a mask. I'm wearing my mask.
Listen, it's not good right now. The idea of staying 6 feet apart is not a bad idea. Wearing a mask is a very, very, very good idea. And it's not so much for you. It's for you to protect others. But some people are incapable of being thoughtful.
Mary had a little lamb.
The false. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Dreamers, the children who were brought here, as you know, by their parents. Should they be worried that they could be deported? And is there anything you can say to assure them right now that they'll be allowed to stay?
They shouldn't be very worried. They are here illegally. They shouldn't be very worried. I do have a big heart. We're going to take care of everybody. We're going to have a very strong border. We're going to have a very solid border. Where you have great people that are here that have done a good job, they should be far less worried. I want the children that are growing up in the United States to be dreamers also. They're not dreaming. The executive order gets rescinded. One good thing
You'll rescind that one too?
One good thing
You'll rescind the Dream Act executive order.
You're going to have to.
DACA.
We have to make a whole new set of standards. And when people come in, they have to come in.
So you're going to split up families.
Chuck,
you're going to deport children.
Chuck, no. We're going to keep the families together. We have to keep the families together.
But you're going to keep them together out?
But they have to go.
What if they have no place to go?
We will work with them. They have to go.
It's still not clear.
Chuck, it'll work out so well. You will be so happy. In 4 years, you're going to be interviewing me, and you're going to say, what a great job you've done, President Trump.
What about the Dreamers? Okay. What about the Dreamers?
Oh, we're going to try and take care of the Dreamers very, very nicely.
President, thank you for your time.
We're going to show great heart. DACA is a very, very difficult subject for me. I will tell you. To me, it's one of the most difficult subjects I have because you have these incredible kids. In many cases, not in all cases. In some of the cases, they're having DACA and they're gang members and they're drug dealers too.
What?
But you have some absolutely incredible kids. I would say mostly.
A decision on DACA?
Sometime today or over the weekend, we'll have a decision.
Should Dreamers be worried?
We love the Dreamers. We love everybody. Thank you very much. The DACA situation is a very difficult thing for me. Because, I love these kids. I love kids. I have kids and grandkids.
I'm here today to announce that the program known as DACA that was effectuated under the Obama administration is being rescinded.
Oh! Can anybody make sense of where he stands? What is his position on DACA or anything at all? No, you can't, because the man is literally making it up as he goes along, and that is not leadership. That is crazy, okay? That is just an insane person. So the big news today is that the Supreme Court finally released its opinion on Obama's executive order back in 2012 regarding the Dreamers. Now, that mashup actually has Donald Trump accusing some of the Dreamers of being gang members. Do we have to say this again? Apparently we do. Dreamers must have a completely clean record in order to maintain their status as being eligible to work and go to school here, or else they lose their DACA status, their deferred action status, right? So he's lying in that clip right there. Of course, he's lying about we love Dreamers. This is so difficult for me. Jeff Sessions rescinded DACA. That is what happened. Jeff Sessions rescinded DACA, and many states decided to bring it to court. And the lower courts along the way who heard this case all said that the executive order that Obama created to give protections to early childhood arrivals, kids who came here as children, but went to school here, never got in trouble here, got jobs here, work hard here, should be left free from the fear of deportation, right? The lower courts agreed with Obama all along the way, saying things like, hey, these kids voluntarily gave their information to the federal government, so you know exactly where they are, and they did it voluntarily so that you could track them, you could make sure their records were clean, you could rescind their protective status if they go off the rails, or if they do something untoward, or if they fail if they get a traffic ticket. Seriously. They had to comply with all the legal requirements, and the U.S. Court of Appeals in the Ninth Circuit, the one Trump hates the most, said that the administration did not comply with the legal requirements that were necessary to end the program. Here's what the Ninth Circuit wrote. To be clear, we do not hold that DACA could not be rescinded. Let that sink in. They're saying, to be clear, we do not hold that DACA could not be rescinded as an exercise of executive branch discretion. We only hold here that where the executive did not make the discretionary choice to end DACA, but rather acted based on an erroneous view of what the law required, the rescission by Jeff Sessions was arbitrary and capricious under settled law. That's why it's important to play Trump's position on DACA, because he doesn't have one, and that's why the courts, the lower courts, all said, listen, if he wanted to end it, he could end it, but he needed to follow the law and do it as required by law, or else he can't. But he wanted to play both sides when it was convenient. And that is what the Roberts Court at the Supreme level found yesterday. He said, quote, we address only whether the Department of Homeland Security complied with the procedural requirement that it provide a reasoned explanation for its action to rescind. Here, the agency failed to consider the conspicuous issues of whether to retain forbearance and what, if anything, to do about the hardship to the DACA recipients. That dual failure, meaning it failed to say what would happen to the 650,000 kids who are playing it right by the book. None of them are gang members. That's just a sick and sad thing that he said there. They didn't explain what would happen to them, nor did they follow the procedures that are required in the original executive order to rescind. Now, they could have, but see, whatever Donald Trump does, he does like a moron. That is the point the Supreme Court was making today. It raises doubts about whether the agency appreciated the scope of its discretion or exercised that discretion in a reasonable manner. So basically what you have the court saying is they are so sick of this man turning our law, our codes of law, our everything about America into a Mad Max movie. They're just sick of it. And John Roberts does not want to preside over a country that resembles a Mad Max movie, and he will be there a lot longer than Donald Trump will. John Roberts does not want to be remembered as the evil stooge who gave complete power to a madman. They did not decide DACA as a policy, whether or not you could exempt children who came here through no fault of their own with their parents at a young age, whether or not you can deport them. It didn't address that. He wrote that the Trump administration failed to provide the procedural requirement that it provide a reasonable explanation. So in plain words, you can do it, but you can't do it like a moron. You can't do it with a total disregard for the law. Unfortunately for Donald Trump, the only way he knows how to do things is like a moron. And now he has the issue back. So expect to start hearing all kinds of ridiculous, specious crap about DACA recipients. He's already tweeting today about how the Supreme Court doesn't like me. I swear to God. 650,000 kids who are doing the right thing every single day are breathing a sigh of relief today, but it's about him. It's about him. Sheer incompetence, okay? He's like a dim-witted Darth Vader, like a dim-witted Joker.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
So, 650,000 people, 90% of DACA recipients are currently employed. Almost half of them are still in school, waiting to be employed. And a good chunk of the employed, of the 90% of the DACA recipients, okay, 90% of them are employed. And they are predominantly working in healthcare. 30,000 DACA recipients are currently employed in healthcare.
This is an issue that impacts every facet of our country, particularly the biggest headlines that we are living with right now, from race relations, these hundreds of thousands of people, black and brown people that we have seen marching in the streets, to the pandemic that we are living under. 27,000 DACA recipients are working on the front lines of our healthcare system today as we speak. Overwhelming support in this country. 86% believe that these dreamers should have protections. And we should say, just to give you a little bit more about who these people are, these are people who came to this country as young children with their parents, whose parents immigrated illegally. They were born in other countries. We're talking about people, many of them who don't speak the languages of the countries where they were born. They have been to school in this country. This is a program that allowed them to come out of the shadows, to pay taxes, to work, to be huge contributors to this economy and to this country. And this ruling today will give them a little bit of a sigh of relief. This is a group that has been torn and twisted in the wind with politics coming from this White House, a president who has really campaigned on, of course, that harsh immigration rhetoric and threatened to end DACA immediately after he took office. Yet then he said nice words about them, saying that he would make a deal to keep these DACA recipients in this country. Today, Terry, we are still waiting to hear what the president has to say about this ruling.
Well, let's show you what the president had to say about this ruling, okay? He literally tweeted this. This is what Twitler decided would be the right reaction to his moronic incompetence, where he intended, through his previous attorney general and this one, who fought this all the way to the Supreme Court, wanting to rescind DACA, but did it like idiots, did it incompetently, so that the court didn't even rule on the issue or the policy. No, they ruled on the incompetence of this administration. Okay, so this is what he tweeted. He said, the SCOTUS decision, shotgun blasts into the face of people that are really proud to call themselves Republicans or conservatives. Really? Shotgun blasts to the face? Are you trying to titillate them? Are you trying to titillate them politically or sexually, maybe? The reference to shotgun blasts in the face during this particular moment in time, I'm more classic Trump. He said, we need more justices or we will lose our Second Amendment and everything else. And everything else. Yeah, you don't want to lose your gun rights right now when there's all these transgender people walking around who can't be discriminated against in the workplace anymore. You don't want to lose your Second Amendment rights when you got all these dreamers working in healthcare on the front lines now, do you? Oh my God! And he did it last night on Hannity too. This was it's one thought that he has. It's all about violence. It's just everything, whatever you talk to him about now, he's so scared and frustrated because the country is suffering through a pandemic, an economic depression, a complete collapse. We had almost another 2 million people added to the unemployment rolls today. I thought we were all open, so why are people still getting laid off? I guess we must have a recession that he didn't want to tell you about. But you've got a pandemic, you've got an economic depression, you've got the Supreme Court going against him, you've got police reform in the pipeline, you've got him doing a rally that Tulsa, the health department in Tulsa doesn't even want him doing. They don't want him there. And he's talking about shotgun blasts to the face and Second Amendment rights. And I swear to God, he was so off the rails last night on Sean Hannity's show. It was just... I mean, he actually said last night on Sean Hannity's show, he was putting this poison into the bloodstream of these dolts that watch this propaganda network. Actually, you know how he goes, oh, many people say, someone told me, and they said, sir, right? You know, all those lies that he told. He literally got on Sean Hannity's show last night, and Sean Hannity asked him what he thought about the cops who were indicted yesterday, who were charged yesterday for the murder of Rayshard Brooks. And he literally said he thinks it's possible. Some people say, I heard that Rayshard Brooks might have had a gun. We all know that is not true. Everyone knows Rayshard Brooks did not have a gun. We all know that Rayshard Brooks fled on foot after punching a police officer and stealing his spent taser. That taser had been discharged 2 times, which is all it can be used for until it needs another charge. And the police officers knew that it was a dead taser that he had. And they still shot him in the back. And Donald Trump doesn't think that's compelling enough, you know, for the people that want to say, well, he resisted arrest, so therefore it's a death penalty offense, which it ain't. But he literally ratcheted it up yesterday and said he thinks it's possible that Rayshard Brooks might have had a gun.
The event that took place yesterday I thought it was a terrible situation, but you can't resist a police officer. And, you know, if you have a disagreement, you have to take it up after the fact. It was a very sad, very, very sad thing. And look, you take a look, it was out of control. The whole situation was out of control. I heard today and just got a report that the police officer's lawyer said that he heard a sound like a gun, like a gunshot, and he saw a flash in front of him. So that's an interesting, you know, I don't know that I would have necessarily believed that, but I will tell you that's a very interesting thing, and maybe that's so. They're going to have to find out.
Why does he put that out on Sean Hannity's show? Why does he put that out on Fox News? So I heard, I don't know if I believe it's true, but I heard I got a report. And then he says his report came from the defense attorney for Officer Rolfe, and Officer Rolfe's defense attorney said, well, it's possible Rayshard Brooks had a gun because they report seeing a flash and a gunshot. No, why does he do that? And then in the very next question, when Sean Hannity is talking to him about dirty cops and all this stuff, you know, he says, well, you know, there are dirty cops like Comey. Seriously, FBI. Dirty cops like Comey. That the Democrats do nothing, even though last night the Democrats passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act out of the Judiciary Committee. It's ready for a full floor vote. The Democrats do nothing except they want to take away your Second Amendment rights. This is what he said. Your Second Amendment rights and a lot of things that you might want to have, you won't have. What is wrong with him?
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Well, who are you going to call if we defund the police or eliminate the police? That seems to be getting momentum in the country. That scares me. I don't like to know your feelings on it.
Well, Joe was referring, when he said dirty cops, I believe, to James Comey, and he was right about that one, and McCabe and that group.
Oh, my
so
God.
he was referring to them, but, it's a different form. It's a different uniform. And, you have bad and you have great. You have cops and police and law enforcement. They're great people, and that's a vast, vast majority of them, and they do an incredible job, and they keep us all safe. And they love their country, and they don't want to make any mistakes. But they're under siege. There's no question about that. And we worked on some things very closely with law enforcement, and a lot of it you had on your show. I noticed the other night you had it on your show. And whether it's the cams, the dash cam and the body cam, which is a camera, basically, very sophisticated camera, and other things. We have a lot of that in the bill, and it passed, and it's going to pay. A lot of things are happening right now, but I signed an executive order, and a lot of that is included in what the Republicans put out today. And the Democrats, all they do is complain. They complain, but they've done nothing. They do nothing. They want to defund, and they want to abolish. They want to abolish police departments, and that's what's going to be. With Biden, if you look, if he ever got in, you'd be abolishing police. You could just watch, because he's not going to be running anything. People around him will, and they will be abolishing police. They'll be getting rid of your Second Amendment very quickly. You will not have a Second Amendment, and many other things you won't have that you'd like to have.
What exactly is wrong with him? Why does every single appeal to his base include guns? Even in the tweets, okay? The DACA decision was a shotgun blast to the face. Last night, he's talking about a cop who kicked a man, literally kicked him while he was dying. Yes, while Rayshard Brooks was dying from 2 gunshots to the back, the police officer kicked him, and Donald Trump thinks you need to pay attention to the fact that he heard that Rayshard Brooks had a gun. There is zero evidence that Rayshard Brooks had a gun, number one. Number two, that they're going to take away your gun. See, now, if Rayshard Brooks had a gun, that would be reason for him to be dead. But if you don't have a gun, that's also reason for him to be dead. Do you see what it's like? So bizarre. Meanwhile, as he's sitting there on this propaganda network saying the Democrats do nothing, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act was being passed out of the Judiciary Committee. It passed 24-14, which is a very substantial bill that does a million very important, bold things that the Republicans refuse to do. It is a comprehensive approach to reforming, or as I like to call it, repealing and replacing policing as we know it with a police force that actually believes in a culture of law, not lawlessness, not kicking people when they're on the ground or falsifying police reports after you knock over with your baton a 75-year-old man and say he tripped and fell. This particular piece of legislation holds the police accountable. It ends racial profiling. It changes the entire culture of law enforcement. It gives power back to the communities to build trust between law enforcement and the community that they're working in, which is, if you ask me, a plus for the police officers who work in a community that they don't even know. They don't even know these people. I mean, what would be so bad is if they did, that's why the repeal and replace thing that happened in Camden, New Jersey in 2012 after they had their most violent year worked, because now the police were fired. They were rehired if they met the standards, if they met the criteria that were now set forth, without a union, by the way, and that required them to get to know the neighborhood. That required them to knock on people's doors, to introduce themselves, to, go to the playground and get to know the kids and where did they live and who did they belong to. And it worked. It freaking worked. So this particular bill, I put it in the homework if you want to see all the things it does. Here's what it does. It prohibits federal, state, and local law enforcement from racial, religious, and discriminatory profiling. It mandates training on racial, religious, and discriminatory profiling for all law enforcement. It bans chokeholds. It bans no-knock warrants at the federal level. It stops the transfer of military-grade equipment to state and local law enforcement, something Obama began when Obama was Obama. I mean, Donald Trump has lied 8 ways to Sunday about, Obama didn't do anything because he didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to do. I mean, that is just, are you freak? I'm so, and he just goes on Fox News to promote these lies. Okay, let's go back to, it mandates the use of dash cams, body cams for federal offices, which right now they don't need. It requires state and local law enforcement to use existing federal funds to ensure the use of body cameras. It establishes a misconduct registry on a national basis so that if you're fired or you leave your agency because of all these complaints against you, you can't go to another jurisdiction and work there. It amends federal criminal statute from willful disregard to reckless disregard to identify and prosecute police misconduct, which is very important. And it does away with qualified immunity. I told you, qualified immunity keeps police officers from being sued for their actions. So I know a lot of people are, well, what if they had to have liability insurance like a doctor? Because if a doctor kills you, he's liable, right? Well, you can't even get there from here because qualified immunity doesn't even allow you to file the suit, okay? It establishes public safety innovation grants for community-based organizations to create local commissions and task forces to help communities reimagine and develop concrete, just, and equitable public safety approaches, meaning, like LA just did this, non-violent, non-criminal calls. In many big cities, you have a separate number for non-criminal calls, for non-violent calls, right? Some of you know it's sometimes it's 311, sometimes it's 2, whatever it is, right, for you. But the police still respond. So we're talking about like unique programs. I believe in Oregon they have Cahoots, which is individuals with specific training in drug addiction, in social work, in foster homes, and child issues, right? Instead of armed law enforcement. Every single state and local law enforcement agency has to report use of force data, and they have to aggregate it by race, sex, disability, religion, and age.
It's the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
President Obama and Vice President Biden never even tried to fix this during their 8-year period.
I've instructed Attorney General Holder to work with cities across the country to help build better relations between communities and law enforcement.
Never even tried to fix this.
That means working with law enforcement officials to make sure their ranks are representative of the communities they serve.
They had no idea how to do it.
It means working to train officials so that law enforcement conducts itself in a way that is fair to everybody.
Never even tried to fix this.
Now, we've launched a police data initiative that's helping Camden and other innovative cities use data to strengthen their work and hold themselves accountable by sharing it with the public.
They had no idea how to do it.
I'm going to be proposing some new community policing initiatives, including up to 50,000 additional body-worn cameras for law enforcement agencies.
President Obama and Vice President Biden never even tried to fix this.
Today, we're also releasing new policies on the military-style equipment that the federal government has in the past provided to state and local law enforcement agencies. We're going to prohibit some equipment made for the battlefield that is not appropriate for local police departments.
Good morning. And
obvious fact check there.
Yeah.
President Trump's claim about his predecessor's efforts to reform policing. In fact, the Trump administration has spent much of its time unraveling those Obama administration police reforms.
Oh! And there's the truth. In living color. There it is. Problem was, Obama had a GOP House and a GOP Senate, and they were never interested in fixing this problem. Never. So everything that he could do, he had to do through the Justice Department. Everything that he could do, he did do. But the GOP was never interested in solving any of the problems of racist policing. They were never interested in banning chokeholds. They were never interested in keeping military equipment out of Odessa, Texas. Yeah, Odessa, Texas. Where I used to that cotton-picking desert of a town has a freaking tank. Yeah, it has a tank. Walnut Creek has military equipment. Go figure out that the GOP, is interested in police reform. No, they never wanted to have a national database. They didn't want pattern and practice investigations to go full throttle. They didn't want to stop the police from, randomly, searching black men who are more likely to get searched by a factor of 3 than a white guy. They're also more likely to get pulled over than a white guy. They're also more likely to die unarmed at the hands of police than a white guy. They're not interested in solving any of these problems. They are interested in exploiting the rift. They're interested in pitting one group against another group, even though we're all the same group. We're all the same group. It's just some people have to wear something all day long that they can't take off. And this causes them to have to live a life that you don't have to live. It causes them to have to fight a different fight every single day to stay alive than we have to fight every single day to stay alive. A different fight. And Americans are sick of it because we get it now. We understand it now. The exploitation of our issues has got to stop. They only want the issue. See, now this is how the Supreme Court now gave Donald Trump the DACA issue. So that's what I say. Expect to see him start tweeting about brown people now and DACA people now. And the Supreme Court doesn't like him now. This is a shotgun blast to the face. The Supreme Court doesn't like me. Always about him, always the victim, always. Why can't we have a police system in this country that responds to non-criminal calls with non-armed people who have a skill set that is different from armed officers' skill set? Why can't we have people responding to nonviolent calls who are social workers, mental health specialists, addiction specialists, homelessness advocates who have information that could help the reason that the call was made instead of hurting the person against whom the call was made? You know, everybody gets this. But he's not willing to let go of this issue. Republicans are not willing to let go of this issue. This issue is one of the best performing issues they have ever had, racism. It is their top performer. That is why they invented it and brought it back to the forefront of all political campaigns when Richard Nixon decided the Southern strategy could work. This is a guy named Lee Atwater, one of the dirtiest guys. You know, you probably, can imagine Karl Rove is a sicko, okay? But he's predated by Lee Atwater, who, by the way, his brain betrayed him. He died of brain cancer. And on his deathbed, he recanted. But we live in a country that isn't interested in solving any of our problems. We live in a country where 98% of us want background checks on guns, and we can't get it. We live in a country where the entire world is in sympathy and empathy, out of empathy for, they are all over their streets. We're all over our streets trying to solve the problem of racist policing. And Donald Trump decides that the best thing he could do is to go on a propaganda news channel with a guy that he talks to every single freaking day, who is also a slumlord, and put out there in the bloodstream of old white men that maybe Rayshard Brooks had a gun. And that Democrats are doing nothing to solve your problems, even though Democrats are the only people who are interested in solving our problems. Whether the solution is something you are for or against, that's a whole other debate. But that they try to solve problems like income inequality through the tax code, the transfer of wealth through the PPP lately. That was some looting that went on there. And they're trying to hold the administration accountable for letting us know where our tax dollars went. Ooh, that's evil. That's evil. Foreign interference in our elections. We were warned he would do it again, and he will do it again, and you can't, the man is off, he's out of it. And now we have this obvious problem, and we've had it for a long time, of racial profiling and policing and judging people by how they look as being criminal before any other thing is known about them. See, the most heinous thing about the Rayshard Brooks killing is that these police officers spent 41 minutes with Rayshard Brooks talking to him. And he was jovial. He was admitting to them that they were just doing their job. He understood. He produced his license. He, agreed to a pat down. And then after the pat down, the conversation went on and on for like another 33 minutes. And then they sobriety field tested him and they tortured him. I mean, they literally put him through, usually when they tell you, to lift your leg in front of you and count to, go 1,001, usually 8 seconds, 10 seconds. They made him count. He's like 1,018, 1,019. And they're like, keep going. And he never loses it. He never loses his cool, ever. They fail to tell him he's under arrest. They fail to read him his rights. They just, out of the clear blue sky, they just decide, okay, now's the time to handcuff him after he was a human being to them. That's what's so shocking. He was obviously a human being to them by that point. They had talked to him. They'd made eye contact with him. They knew that he was there to celebrate his daughter's birthday party. She was at home wearing her party dress, waiting for him to come home. He went to get hamburgers. His wife didn't know what she wanted for an order, and he kept calling her, and his cell phone died. I mean, he was a human being to them, and still they treated him like a freaking animal, knowing that the taser that he took, which he shouldn't have done, that's not a death penalty offense, by the way, was spent. I mean, and these people, all these Republicans, all these conservatives, all of these nutbags on the TV, on the radio, all they want to do is inflame, exacerbate, agitate. They need their voters to be constantly afraid of a boogeyman.
Mary had a little ram. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Once Mr. Brooks was shot, there is an Atlanta policy that requires that the officers have to provide timely medical attention to Mr. Brooks or to anyone who is injured. But after Mr. Brooks was shot, for some period of 2 minutes and 12 seconds, there was no medical attention applied to Mr. Brooks. But when we examined the videotape and in our discussions with witnesses, what we discovered is during the 2 minutes and 12 seconds that Officer Rolfe actually kicked Mr. Brooks while he laid on the ground.
Oh my God.
While he was there fighting for his life. Secondly, from the videotape, we were able to see that the other officer, Officer Brosnan, actually stood on Mr. Brooks's shoulders while he was there struggling for his life. We were able to conclude that based on the way that these officers conducted themselves while Mr. Brooks was lying there, that the demeanor of the officers immediately after the shooting did not reflect any fear or danger of Mr. Brooks, but their actions really reflected other kinds of emotions.
Gee, I wonder what other kinds of emotions. They kicked him after they shot him in the back and stood on him as he lay dying. The other important detail that you need to know, especially if you watch propaganda TV, is that the taser was spent.
We have also concluded that Rolfe was aware that the taser in Brooks's possession, that it was fired twice. And once it's fired twice, it presented no danger to him or to any other persons. Now, we have had something quite remarkable to happen in this case, and it involves the testimony of the other officer, Devin Brosnan, because Officer Brosnan has now become a state's witness. He has decided to testify on behalf of the state in this case. What he has said to us, that is within a matter of days, he plans to make a statement regarding the culpability of Officer Rolfe. But he indicated that he is not psychologically willing to give that statement today. Officer Brosnan, however, has admitted that he was in fact standing on Mr. Brooks's body immediately after the shooting.
Ugh. So just so you know, Devin Brosnan, who was the first responding officer, who was willing to let Rayshard Brooks go. For those of you who haven't watched the entire 43-minute video, I suggest you do it. It's in the homework, not today, not yesterday, the day before. It's in the homework section. We put the video in there for you. 43 minutes. It's also on my Twitter feed if you prefer it that way, at Randi Rhodes. You can see the whole 43-minute exchange. Now, Devin Brosnan was the first responding officer, and he is the person who found Rayshard Brooks sleeping in the Wendy's drive-thru. Now, Rayshard Brooks literally drove about 5 yards. So that's the DUI, 5 yards, because he was met earlier in the day at that Wendy's, left his car there, went and hung out with his wife and children. They brought him back to the Wendy's to pick up this rental car. And the only place he drove while inebriated, which he clearly was from that parking space to the Wendy's drive-thru, and that's where he fell asleep. This officer, Devin Brosnan, is the responding officer. Wendy's called 911 to say that there's a guy sleeping in the drive-thru and people are having to drive around him. Devin Brosnan it told him, go just move your car into that parking spot and sleep it off. But Rayshard Brooks fell asleep again. And that is when Devin Brosnan called for Officer Rolfe to come and back him up, because Devin Brosnan had only been on the force for 2 years, didn't know exactly what to do. Didn't know. For 41 minutes, this Rolfe dude played with Rayshard Brooks. Played with him, knowing what he was going to end up doing to him. Just knowing. and then kicked him after he shot him in the back twice. And also knowing that the taser was spent. There was no threat at all. The Atlanta Police Department, because, you know, it's only a few bad apples, right? It's only a few bad apples. Let's quote Chris Rock every time we hear the term bad apple, which is in Chris Rock's comedy, but it's only funny because it's true. Bad apple is a nice name for murderer. In support of this bad apple, the rest of the Atlanta police force, or at least a bunch of the officers in this particular precinct, called in sick last night. Called out. It's got a name. It's called the Blue Flu. But they're not all bad, right? They're not all bad. No, they're on the side of law and order. They took an oath to protect and serve, except they won't. They won't. And this is the same story that happened in Minneapolis. This is the same thing that happened or in Buffalo, where clearly the police used their baton to knock over a 75-year-old man. Martin Gugino is still in the hospital. He has a fractured skull and he's unable to walk. But because this police officer was held accountable for doing that inexplicable thing, that act of violence against a 75-year-old peace activist who simply walked up to ask them a question when they were trying to enforce curfew. Ooh, curfew, everybody, curfew. Something we haven't had in this country since World War II. He decided that he was going to use his baton and push Martin Gugino so hard that he bashed his head into, and of course the president said, well, I think he fell twice as hard as they pushed him, and I think it could be Antifa. I think it's a, you know, it's... They called in sick too to rally around a police officer who was clearly out of line, was clearly more violent than he needed to be against an unarmed 75-year-old man. Same thing's happening in Atlanta now. I will tell you, Devin Brosnan, Piers Brosnan is how I remember his name, right? Devin Brosnan turned himself in today, and his lawyer is saying he's not going to turn state's evidence. I don't know what the deal. I don't know if the union is pressuring him. I don't know if his fellow officers are pressuring him, but it's a big open question about whether or not he's going to do the right thing in the end and testify against Rolfe, who, by the way, had 15 complaints against him. And we found out that one of the complaints against him was shooting an unarmed black man. That investigation by Internal Affairs never was concluded, and there was zero conclusion about the situation all these years later. But Rolfe had, he'd been, reamed out verbally for like crashing his car and stuff like that. He'd had all these different complaints against him. None of them were ever resolved. None of them.
Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
I mean, do you have your hands around how many officers are involved in this not calling in or calling out sick, this apparent revolt in response to these charges? The department put out that tweet I read earlier for the audience saying that they think they have enough resources. But how many officers are we talking about? Do you know?
Well, we don't have a count yet because we were in the midst of a shift change. But what I do know is that we do have enough officers to cover us through the night. And our streets won't be any less safe because of the number of officers who've called out. But it's just my hope, again, that our officers will remember the commitment that they made when they held up their hand and they were sworn in as police officers.
Right, but there's strength in numbers,
Atlanta.
as we both know. That's why I'm asking you, Mayor. If we're talking about 6 10, people who are particularly passionate about what they think the job is about and how it's being perceived in this prosecution. That's one thing. If it's dozens, you have a different scale of problem on your hand.
We do, but the good thing is that we are not the only agency in Atlanta. We have other partners across the metropolitan area, including assistance from the state and from the county and from other jurisdictions. So we will be fine. The thing that I'm most concerned about is how we repair the morale in our police department and how do we ensure that our communities are safe as they interact with our police officers.
So what do you do? Do you reach out to the union? What are you doing to deal with this kind? I mean, this is an unusual thing to hear about. I know it's all unusual. I know we're living through unusual times. But if you have any scale of officers not wanting to report to duty, that is a novel problem to have. Have you reached out to the union? And what are the different avenues of access to heal?
I've not spoken directly to the union today, but I'm sure that we will be in contact with them. I've been in contact with our interim police chief. And listen, there's no playbook for what we are dealing with right now across this country. And so what I do know is that we have a lot of men and women who work for our police department, who care about this city, and they work each and every day with integrity and with honest interactions with our communities. And so those are the people who I expect will show up for work. And if we have officers who don't want bad officers weeded out of the force, then that's another conversation that we need to have with all of our officers. Because when we're talking about fixing what's wrong with our police department and what's happening in our communities is just as much for the protection of our communities as it is for our police officers.
Yes. That is the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, who has been put through pure hell as a mayor of a large metropolitan area. She amazes me. She stuns me. And she is actually saying what is true, that if you don't want to weed out rogue officers or lawless officers or the kinds of officers who would plant evidence or the kind of officers that would take a plunger and shove it up Abner Louima's rectum. If you don't want to weed out those kinds of sadomasochistic or racially tinged or compromised officers, then don't tell me it's just a few bad apples. Don't tell me that that's the case. I will tell you that the union, the regional director for the International Brotherhood of Police Officers is a guy named Vince Champion in Atlanta. And he said there are officers walking off. There are officers saying they're not going to leave the precinct unless it's to help another officer. Some are walking off and sitting in their personal vehicles. Now, some people who live in interesting neighborhoods know that the police don't show up half the time anyway. And if these bad officers aren't to be weeded out with the support of the good officers who won't show up, then this is just an acceleration towards abolishing the police force there and standing up a new one, like Camden, New Jersey, had to do. Morale is down in police departments. Morale is down. Why? They don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to be exposed as engaging in bad behavior. I'm so sorry, but if you're going to make the claim that it's a few bad apples, then you're going to have to explain to me how the Buffalo officers who were in this riot team, they didn't resign from the police force. Now, why give up a paycheck? They resigned from that team to support the man who used his baton to knock down 75-year-old Martin Gugino, fracturing his skull, and he's still in the hospital, not able to walk. Okay? If you don't want to weed out the bad officers in Atlanta who obviously escalated a sleeping man situation into a freaking murder, then I suggest you're part of the problem and not, to say bad apple anymore. The whole freaking tree is poison if that's the case. If that's the case. So that is why the Democrats are working as hard as they are on the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, and the Republican Party slammed something together in 2 days, with their only black representative, Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, who, by the way, said that he had been pulled over by police 11 times. 11 times. One time he said he was pulled over for failure to signal early enough. Early enough. It's not that he didn't signal. They didn't think he did it early enough before he made his turn. I mean, these people understand what's going on and they have no interest in fixing it. And that is why they use Tim Scott's face as the face of law enforcement reform. That was just an empty gesture. There was no there. And that is why the President of the United States, the leader of the Republican Party, had the audacity to go on Fox News last night and insist that he had heard that Rayshard Brooks had a gun. And you can't resist arrest, he said. You can't treat police officers like that. Police officers are getting a raw deal, he said. Resisting arrest is a crime. It's not a death penalty crime. Very few crimes are death penalty crimes. And it didn't just happen that way, where they knocked on his window and he popped out and it was just melee. No, 43 minutes they talked to this man. 43 minutes they had. And in 43 minutes they knew he was a cordial guy. He wasn't a dangerous guy. They had patted him down. He didn't have a gun. And the taser that he stole in a panic was spent. Those are the facts. That is how it is.
Connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
All right, 33 after. Let me just tell you, today for Free Speech TV Summer Pledge Drive is a match day. It's a match day up to $12,000, meaning if you gave $12,000, it would become $24,000. And any increment lower than that $5 becomes $10, $100, $200, etc., right? And this is thanks to Charles and Carla, Tom, Jeff, Abby and Mary in California, Suzanne in Virginia, Christina in Maryland, Ed and June in Oregon, Helen in Washington, Jim in North Carolina, Mac in Colorado, and BJ in Texas. They have put their own money up so that you can have your donation matched by them today and today only, up to $12,000. So just go to freespeech.org and pledge whatever you think is reasonable for you. And if you want to use the phone, by all means, just dial 877-378-8669. 877-378-8669. And thank you very, very much from the whole Free Speech TV family. All right, so this is the landscape in which we toil, right? We have problems. We need to solve them. One group of people is interested in covering up any problems we might have, exploiting any problems we might have, making you afraid of any problems we might have, giving you a sense of dread about our country, and then telling you who to blame for it. And the other group of people, and we only have two groups in this country because we have an electoral college, which really blows. But that is the landscape in which we toil. The other group of people puts out meaningful legislation that says, hey, maybe Odessa, Texas shouldn't have a freaking tank for these freaking police departments. Maybe Walnut Creek doesn't need military gear. Maybe we should have mental health people responding to mental health calls. Maybe we should actually talk about background checks when it comes to owning an Uzi. Maybe the police shouldn't turn a blind eye when these crazy boys, there's all different boys now, B-O-I, boys, show up strapped to the gills at the Capitol in Lansing. Maybe we should have some solutions to some of our problems, like COVID. Maybe we should be wearing masks. Maybe we should stop screaming about how business owners don't own their businesses anymore, so that if you don't want to wear a mask in their business, you protest, or you scream on the street, or you go to your local legislature and you give a speech with props saying, God bless America, I will not wear a mask, when we obviously have not kicked the butt of this virus, okay? This virus is not gone. It's more than not gone. It's rearing its ugly little head in Florida now. And you know, you got so many people in that party over there that just want to lie to your face about how you can make your life better, about how you can protect yourself from everything, from government ripoffs and looting and redistribution of your wealth, all the way down to a freaking virus. I mean, Rick DeSantis stood on the street the other day screaming that we owe him an apology, and he's our Florida governor. We owe him an apology because COVID wasn't out of control. Well, let me just tell you, yesterday, our one day total for positive cases was 3,200 cases. We are now in Florida becoming the epicenter of the COVID pandemic. An idiot boy who ran, I don't know if you remember his campaign, he put his little newborn baby in a Make America Great racist onesie. That's how he won. Stood on the street and said, where do I go to get my apology?
Wait 2 weeks. Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened. We have a lower death rate than the Acela Corridor, D.C., everyone up there. We have a lower death rate than the Midwest, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. So we've succeeded, and I think that people just don't want to recognize it.
And then he demanded an apology, and now all of a sudden we're the new epicenter of COVID cases. We're the new epicenter. And, you know, I will say I'm semi-surprised at the people around us, you know, the people around me who are wearing masks. But you do have your odd duck that just absolutely will get in your face and refuse. And then they start making these excuses like, I have a health condition. And because of HIPAA, I don't need to tell you what it is. You don't have a health condition that would keep you from wearing a mask, okay? You just don't. You're lying and you're a liar, and you follow a liar and you believe in a liar, and you are jeopardizing your neighbors, you're jeopardizing everyone in the Publix, you're jeopardizing everyone in the... I mean, we had one girl, a healthcare worker, and because Governor Ron DeSantis stood there and said, all clear, everything's good, we can just, you know, not fight COVID anymore. She is a healthcare worker. She went with 15 of her friends to an Irish pub, didn't wear a mask, because I don't even know how you go to a bar and wear a mask. I don't know how you go to a restaurant and wear a mask. You don't, right? And just sat there and partied all night, and all 15 of them positive for COVID. All 15 of them. She's been sick for 9 days now. She can't breathe. Nobody can breathe. Oklahoma does not want Donald Trump having an indoor 20,000 crowd.
Let me be clear. Anyone planning to attend a large-scale gathering will face an increased risk of becoming infected with COVID-19. Also, I want to be clear. We support everyone's American rights as Americans to assemble. We want to keep people safe. I know so many people are over COVID, but COVID is not over. COVID is here. It's transmitting very efficiently in our community. Please stay the course, follow recommendations. If you're in public, wear masks, social distance, pay close attention to hand washing and hygiene, and keep yourself safe and healthy.
That's the health department in Tulsa, the head of the health department, telling you it's not a great idea. It's not a great idea not to wear a mask. It's not a great idea to gather in a indoor arena, 20,000 strong, and then he claims it'll be an overflow crowd in another room, another closed room. You know, like I said yesterday, we're still betting on whether or not he will do it, whether or not he'll go through with it. But Dr. Fauci said one of the problems we face in the United States is that, unfortunately, there's a combination of an anti-science bias that people are, for reasons sometimes, you know, inconceivable and not understandable. They just don't believe in science. And they just don't believe in authority. So when they see someone up in the White House, which has an air of authority to it, who's talking about science, there are some people that just won't believe it. And that's unfortunate, you know, because science is truth.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Saying criminal in China for drugs, by the way, means that's serious. They're getting a maximum penalty, and you know what the maximum penalty is in China for that, and it goes very quickly. It's interesting. Where you have Singapore, they have very little drug problem. Where you have China, they have very little drug problem. States with a very powerful death penalty on drug dealers don't have a drug problem. I don't know that our country is ready for that, but if you look throughout the world, the countries with a powerful death penalty with a fair but quick trial, they have very little, if any, drug problem. That includes China.
He's a sick, twisted freak of a. I don't even want to call him a man. He's a sack of flesh, you know. And he just says things, and it's just so bizarre, you know. And the two there, we have a tie for the worst person in the world now. There's a tie between John Bolton and Donald Trump. I'm sure you heard all the contretemps today. John Bolton's book is shipping out, and all the media and journalists got their advance copy so that they can interview John Bolton and talk to John Bolton, who is now saying, now he tells us, that the president is not fit to serve, that the president doesn't care about anything at all that has to do with you, your life, your situation, your money, your policing, your nothing. He doesn't care about you. Everything he does is all for his reelect. It's all for 2020. It's always been for 2020. And he's a malignant narcissist. He's unfit to... Yeah, but when John Bolton was asked during the impeachment trial to go to the Senate and give his testimony, or go to the House and give his testimony, he said, make me. Like the big baby that all conservatives deep down inside are. Make me. Subpoena me. Make me go. And of course, the Senate is the GOP. They wouldn't issue a subpoena, and every one of them, except for Mitt Romney, voted to acquit Donald Trump. Knowing he was unfit. Knowing. Know why? They only ever wanted a president, just like Grover Norquist said, they only ever wanted a president who could hold a pen and sign the bills to reduce the taxes of the wealthy. Paul Weyrich, who started this whole Heritage Foundation bull right back in 1980 with Ronald Reagan, and this appeal to the racist silent majority, the racist masses, he said, we don't want people to vote. We're not interested in having people. In fact, we do better when less people vote, because we don't have the numbers that the Democrats have. We don't have the support that Democrats have. So we must work to suppress the vote. We must not encourage voting. We must do everything we can to, gerrymander the vote any way that we can. We have to keep people from accessing that ballot box if we want to stay in power. And Donald Trump said the same thing. If you do vote by mail, you'll never see another Republican president, because they know they're unpopular. They know that. Donald Trump knows when he says, he tweeted out today, 96% of the Republican Party supports me. It's really 88%, but that 88% is 88% of 20%. Only 20% of the American people still identify as Republicans, and 88% of those support him. That ain't enough to win an election, unless you cheat. And Adam Schiff tried to tell us, he said 8 ways to Sunday. He will do it again. He cannot change. He will not change. You know that.
He has betrayed our national security, and he will do so again. He has compromised our elections, and he will do so again. You will not change him. You cannot constrain him. He is who he is. Truth matters little to him. What's right matters even less, and decency matters not at all. I do not ask you to convict him because truth or right or decency matters nothing to him, but because we have proven our case and it matters to you.
Yeah.
Truth matters to you. Right matters to you. You are decent. He is not who you are.
Man, we tried. We really did try. I mean, there was no question we tried. And now John Bolton confirms Donald Trump is the worst person in the world. But, he's still laying claim to the title himself. We have a tie, everybody. We have a tie. Yeah, he's doing a sit down. I think it's on Sunday. He's going to sit down with Martha Raddatz from ABC. They've released snippets of it. Here's a little bit.
You described the president as erratic, foolish, behaved irrationally, bizarrely. You can't leave him alone for a minute. He saw conspiracies behind rocks and was stunningly uninformed. He couldn't tell the difference between his personal interests and the country's interests.
I don't think he's fit for office. I don't think he has the competence to carry out the job. There really isn't any guiding principle that I was able to discern other than what's good for Donald Trump's reelection.
You say that you were astonished by what you saw. A president for whom getting reelected was the only thing that mattered, even if it meant endangering or weakening the nation?
Well, I think he was so focused on the reelection that longer-term considerations fell by the wayside. So if he thought he could get a photo opportunity with Kim Jong-un at the demilitarized zone in Korea, there was considerable emphasis on the photo opportunity and the press reaction to it, and little or no focus on what such meetings did for the bargaining position of the United States.
Thanks, John. Thanks a lot. It's as if he were, the first mate on the Titanic, right? And after everybody died and the ship, goes down and all this, and the news media covers it, and then he comes out and he goes, "Hey, there's an iceberg out there. Buy my book." Why is he telling us this now? Why wouldn't he do it when it mattered? Why wouldn't he come forward when it mattered? He had a chance to show us that while he's a war hawk and a guy who wanted to take the top 11 floors off the United Nations years ago while serving under Bush, that he would do something for his country. He would do something to save his own country other than declare war on unarmed nations around the world. Guess what? He failed miserably. So here's a little something for you. Of course I'm not going to buy this damn book. Not a chance I would. If somebody had it and got a free copy of it, because they do send free advance copies to journalists with suggested questions for interviews, by the way. You should only know. And they passed it around to their friends. We could read it without enriching John Bolton. There's an excerpt from the book in the Wall Street Journal today Now, I realize that that is behind a paywall, but of course, I put it in the homework for those of you who are subscribers to the Wall Street Journal, so you could read this chapter that's covered in that clip there for yourself. It's disgusting. The president is disgusting. John Bolton is disgusting, proving everyone around this president is disgusting. As Donald Trump says, they're a disgrace. They're a disgrace. These are people that, when given a chance to save their country from a madman, from a lunatic, from a mentally ill, malignant narcissist who only cares for himself, again, proving the Republican Party never cared about your issues. They have not cared about your issues since I've been following politics. Not one single thing they have ever proposed helped the middle class. They busted our unions. They redistributed our wealth. They screwed with the tax code. They value money-making money over work-making money. They have robbed the middle class of home ownership with the market crash and their housing bubbles and their liar loans, protected Wall Street and banksters and every other bad player, bad apple in our system. They don't drain the swamp, they drain you. They are the swamp. They will always be the swamp creatures. And now, in the middle of a depression and a pandemic, he's going to release a book about how he could have, should have, would have, but didn't bother. I want to curse so bad, but you get it.